Hi, everyone. Today we're talking about midlife career pivots, and joining me for this discussion is experienced actuary Mark Barda. After 20 plus years of working as an actuary in life insurance, Mark relocated to Israel 12 years ago. He's a senior pricing actuary for Israel and Medi at Swiss Re, with responsibility for costing, writing, and monitoring Swiss Re's book of reinsurance, life, and health contracts. Mark's move to Israel came mid-career and presented a range of personal and professional challenges. In parallel, Mark embraced a new work-life balance and enjoys, amongst other things, cooking, growing fruits, hiking, participating in his synagogue community, and attempting to adapt 80s rock to classical acoustic guitar. Mark, I should get my drum kit out and we can have a bit of a jam sesh, but welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So, Mark, I'm really curious to hear what it was like for you making that transition mid-career to Israel, to a new country, to a new role. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear a little bit about what it was like for you and what you learnt from your experience when you were an Aussie-based consultant, and what you learnt from that.
I guess the beginning of my career was quite sort of traditional for an Australian actuary. I worked for insurance companies before working for a consulting firm, then Tillinghast or Towers Perrin as it was at the time. And it was doing very much sort of traditional sort of Australian actuarial work in the life insurance industry. It was a time for learning a lot, and a very sort of challenging time as well. I think those challenges are also very good when you're sort of younger as well. I had a young family. I was working hard. I was under the pressure that comes with consulting as well. Sometimes relishing in it, sometimes suffering with it.
Yes.
But always learning. In fact, one sort of thing I kind of always reflect on is even the sort of the more difficult of the times that you've had, or the times that you find less interesting. At the time, you find them sort of like, why am I doing this sometimes?
Yep.
But on reflection, I always go, wow, I learned a lot. I learned a lot in my time as consulting. I think I learned a lot about trying to develop the really very technical issues. I learned a lot about communication. I learned a lot about interacting with others who knew a lot more about their business than you could possibly ever know. And still trying to contribute. And just, it was still sort of the sort of formative parts of the career where you're learning a lot, learning what you like, learning what you don't like as well. And even those bits that you don't like, they come back to you later in career, and they're always useful.
Always useful. They're good lessons, aren't they? Even if you're learning what you don't like or which bits of the job you find harder, or, there's always good lessons in there, isn't there?
For sure. Like at one stage in my career, I pursued a sort of track where I wanted to get into the super industry for a while.
Okay.
I was sitting my superannuation exam, and I thought this will be great for me to learn that. Within 6 months, I knew this was wrong for me.
It
but I was
wasn't
still
for
there
you.
for a little while longer.
Okay.
And yet, I look back at it and go, there's so much that I gained from that still that I use today. Similarly with valuation work, you can find, I don't touch valuation work anymore. I'm very glad not to, but I very much value the fact that I did have the exposure to it. And I can talk that language and with my valuation colleagues. I can understand those issues without actually having to do it anymore myself.
So it sounds like there were lots of good lessons from that experience as a consultant and doing more that sort of traditional life insurance work when you were here in Australia. So, Mark, it sounds like it was a great experience for you, but you were looking for something different at the time. What prompted the move to Israel?
There was, I guess, there was always a sort of deep set sort of issue of personal identity that, I wanted to live in Israel.
Uh-huh.
I'm Jewish, and this is, where I felt that I would live a sort of more, for me personally, a more fulfilling
Mm,
sort of life.
mm.
Um, it took a while because with anyone, I think we kind of can easily get stuck into what's easy for today.
So true.
Um, and it was coming down to sort of a crunch time, I guess, particularly as our eldest child at the time was 13 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and as tough as tough as it is to make decisions for yourself, it's sometimes a bit rougher to go and do that for your children.
For sure.
And at that point, we thought, okay, if we don't do this, my wife and I and our 4 kids move now,
Mm-hmm.
then then there won't be another opportunity
Mm.
to do that. Um,
So
it
the
was
timing was right. The timing was right at that point for you to make that move. And it was a move that you wanted to make.
it was a move that we wanted to make for a long time.
Mm.
The timing was probably at the end of the period at which
Okay.
we could have done it. We could have
Yeah.
done it possibly earlier, but as I said, you kind of get stuck,
Yep.
in your routine. You wonder, like, well, this is my job, and this is what I tend to do. I've got a family. I want to support them. I'm not sure that I'm game enough or ready to take the risk to do
Mm.
something,
Mm.
which is quite an odd for. I always think it's a strange thing for actuaries in general. We work with risk all the time, but
Yep.
when it comes to our own personal story or personal journey, where often we become super risk averse at times.
Mm, mm. It can be hard to make those changes though, especially like you said, you're busy in the day to day, you're raising a family, you're doing your job, you're keeping everything going. To make that sort of wholesale change and uproot the family, even though it was something that you want to do, it's not something that you're always thinking about or that's always easy to make that decision to do. So you were
Yeah,
at the kind of the end of when you could do it.
that's right. That's right. And it was, as you said, it was actually, I don't necessarily think that most of us go and do these sort of wholesale changes, but it really was a wholesale change.
Mm,
It
mm.
was a change personally, in many ways, and professionally in many ways as well. So it was a huge leap.
Yeah, yeah. So can you tell us a bit about what was challenging for you with that move, Mark?
Um, so on a sort of on a personal side of things, there was some massive challenges. There was language. I came to Israel and I couldn't put a sentence together,
Wow.
um, in Hebrew. So I arrived. I went to school
Mm-hmm.
again just to learn language, which was probably one of the most fun times I've had, in
Fun.
terms of, yeah. Oh, it was glorious fun.
Was
I,
it?
I went to class. I was just learning language. Um, I um, that aspect of it was so much fun. I was only doing that half the day or
Yeah.
so, and then I could be around to go and take care of my kids at the end of the day as well. Um, so it was challenging, but it was
Mm,
really just a lot of fun.
mm.
There's a huge sort of challenge with culture as well, both in terms of just doing everyday things and in a business environment as well. The Israeli business environment is very, very different. Um, there was the challenge of a sort of career setback in a way
Mm.
as well, because after taking time off to learn language, I then went to work. I started just a traditional life insurance role,
Uh-huh.
um, but I felt like I went back 20 years in my career in terms of
Really?
the first role that I took. Three
In
months
terms
later, I
of
took another,
in terms of seniority, like in terms
in
of,
terms of
yeah.
seniority and the
Okay.
sort of technical sorts of things that I was doing.
Right.
3 months later, I took another job, and then I felt like I was only 10 years behind. So I was like,
That's a pretty quick catch up.
yeah. Um, um, so that's a challenge sort of personally as well, because it sort of hits your sort of ego
Yeah, of
to a large
course.
degree.
Of
Like, I know I
course.
can do more, but I'm not doing it at the moment. Sort of had to
Yeah.
rebuild. And over time, I felt like I did that. I changed jobs. I later went independent consulting. I tried to start up and failed. It's actually part of the standard resume, I think, in Israel. With startup sort of culture, it's like, what startups have you worked on? The fact that you failed doesn't really matter too much.
It's just expected.
Before I eventually started at Swiss Re, where I felt like I've sort of attained what I was and moved on as well. And then there's the challenge of your sort of support network. By moving countries, your family, your close friends, all of those are not there anymore.
True.
And that's a sort of another sort of rebuild again.
Did you have friends or family in Israel when you moved, or was it a complete starting from blank canvas?
It was start from scratch.
Wow.
Yeah. We have some like distant family here, there, and everywhere, but we spent a lot of time researching where we wanted to live, and searching for the right town and the community that we felt that would be the most supportive of us, because we knew there were going to be challenges. And we fell into a smaller town. My town of Tel Mond has about 15,000 people, but within that, my synagogue community is very small still, and got a lot of other immigrants, and who've also had that similar experience, and that became our support network.
You supported each other.
That's right. And so, we spent time looking for that support network before we moved. It wasn't just, let's run and
you did a lot of research.
There was a lot of research done.
Yep.
That's right. And even, and professionally speaking as well, it was very similar. During the time that I was learning Hebrew, at the same time, I was starting to build my own professional network as well, and going, meet with the different actuaries around. Where I don't know how many fellows there are in Australia these days. I'm guessing 3,000 or so.
Couple of thousand. Yep.
Like that. In Israel, there are 150 or so fellows.
150.
With a population that's roughly a third of Australia's. So it's a very small club, and it doesn't take long to get to know the whole sort of professional community as well.
Wow, it's very small.
So it was small, but it's also a matter of like that was part of the sort of preparation and the sort of acclimatization. They were all those things were different challenges, and to greater or lesser extent, I think we sort of my family, myself, but we've achieved that. I always relate a story of the work environment where I finally felt that I sort of was getting there. When I was a pricing actuary for an insurance company in Israel, and I was quiet. I'm generally not necessarily that quiet a person, but actuaries might be quiet in general. But language changes that. When people's behavior in different languages can be quite different, particularly as I'd only been in the country for maybe a year, and I wasn't that strong still in my Hebrew and not that confident yet. And I was in a product meeting, which had like the product manager and the underwriters and the IT people and the legal and admin and the actuary.
Yep.
And the product manager at one end of the room asked me in this product meeting, says, "So Mark, where's the pricing? You said it would take 2 weeks." This is all in Hebrew. This will take 2 weeks. 2 weeks had passed. Where's the pricing of this product? And I went, "Well, I said it'll take 2 weeks less, and you gave me the product actually only 2 days ago, the specification. So therefore it's going to take 2 weeks less 2 days."
Sounds fair.
And he started screaming at me, because this is the different culture as exists in Israel. Screaming at me like, "You're late, you haven't delivered on it, you promised me that it was going to be 2 weeks." And it clicked at that moment. And I started screaming back. Now, you would never, ever dream of screaming in a meeting in Australia in a business context.
Not at all.
but I was screaming back at him, arguing really, back and forth. And this was going back and forth. And I can't remember how the meeting resolved. Certainly, I didn't have rates to sort of give him on the spot. I gave it to him 2 weeks and 2 days later. 2 weeks and 2 days later. But coming out of the meeting, one of my other colleagues comes up to me and looks at me and goes, "Mark, are you okay? Like, I've never seen you so upset and stressed and everything." And I went, "No, that was fantastic. Like, I now feel I'm here. I've actually acclimatized.
Yeah.
I can now do business in Israel. I can speak the language. I can hold my head up professionally as well."
Yep.
And I felt like, okay, this is working. And it wasn't the end of the journey.
No.
So a bit of advice that my neighbour gave me when talking about sort of re-establishing yourself or establishing something new. He says, 5 years. He says,
5 years.
It takes 5 years. You might think it's going to take less and you've got this plan to get there, but 5 years. And that was only after a year or two, that interaction of being. And there was still a lot of learning to go through in my career at that stage. But after 5 years, I also felt like, this is working.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll always be an immigrant. I'll always be that guy from Australia who has a different sort of twist on it. But after that sort of period, I felt like, okay, this whole thing is working.
Yeah. You felt like you were belonging, and you felt like you understood how business was done and what was different and how to behave in that new environment.
Yes, and feel very comfortable in that environment.
Amazing. That is great advice. That 5 years rule. It does take time to settle into a new place, even if you're moving within the same country. I can only imagine how much else there is to get your head around if you're, as you said, a new language, a new business environment, new community, building your support networks. And so it's been 12 years for you now since you've moved to Israel. Is that right? 12 years?
Yeah, it's 12 years now. But and the 5 years, I would actually say, relates also to if establishing a new business, a new career or something like that. Don't expect that you might have this business plan that shows it's going to just soar, right?
Yeah.
5 years, still like.
Yeah, everything takes time, and it's not always linear either, is it? We want everything. We think if we plan and we're smart actuaries and we do it right, then we'll get there faster and quicker than other people say we will, and everything will be linear and smooth. But in reality, life's never like that, or rarely like that. So yeah, good to have those benchmarks. So now that you've well past the 5-year mark, you've been there for 12 or so years now, what does work and life look like for you now in Israel post this career pivot?
I'd say that the good things, like all the good things that I was doing earlier in my career, I'm still doing. So the things that I generally like doing as an actuary, is taking the technical stuff and then turning that into a clear message for lay people or other business professionals. That stuff I still do as much as I ever do, and it's kind of the bread and butter of my sort of professional sort of work that I love the most. So that sort of part I'm still doing. I'm working for an international global reinsurer, which is quite a different environment to working in a sort of a single market. And that is always fun as well. It's just a broader perspective. It's dealing with people from many more cultures as well, which I enjoy. The work-life balance is quite different as well. Corona, I'm sure I'm not the only one, has sort of reset that as well.
Yep.
I was one that was like, I forget about working from home. I can't do it. Like, if I'm working from home, it's just too many distractions. It'll never happen. I can't do it. Like, I love it.
So that was quite a change for you.
I'll go into the office because I see the value of going into the office,
Mm.
and having the face-to-face contact with people. It's not the same just doing things virtually.
It's not the same, no.
Um, but being around home a lot more has sort of changed my sort of style of work as well. I do get caught into the trap of sometimes working late, but then that's balanced by, you know, I've got to go and fix the irrigation system on my garden, and I'll
Right.
just do that. Well, that I have to do during daylight hours. There's things that I'm doing there.
Some swings and roundabouts then.
Yeah. Yeah. At this stage as well, I've got older children now, so I'm not running around with them, and so a lot more. I'm finding myself with more time to look at other interests as well, most of which have nothing to do with work.
Yep.
Doing a lot of hiking, doing, as I said, gardening and cooking, and still playing some music.
Some music.
As well.
Wonderful. Yeah. So, so it sounds like your mid-career pivot, whilst to start with, it was very challenging. You were learning a new language, you were learning a new business environment, you were building a support network. You've navigated those challenges, you've overcome those obstacles, and now you've got this life that's in a lot more balance and giving you more of what you need, both in your day-to-day work, but also in your life more generally.
Yeah. I mean, I wish, to some degree, I wish I knew how things were going to turn out. Yeah.
Do you think it would have made a difference?
It would have made a difference. I don't know whether the journey would have necessarily been any different, but I think it would have made me sort of think that in the times that were the most challenging and most difficult, I would have gone, okay, I would have understand better that this is all for the good,
right,
as well,
right,
and this is all towards building something that is going to be a sort of a very positive sort of outcome.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, so it might have reassured you of any concerns that you had about what was going to happen and whether it would be worth it in the end. And I think I talked to a lot of people at that mid-career stage who were maybe feeling a bit like there should be more to life, or they're wanting to make a leap, but there's sort of fear or other obstacles in their way. And it sounds like if you were to give them some advice, you'd be encouraging them to maybe make that change, now that you've lived through it yourself. But if there was one piece of advice that you had for other mid-career actuaries who were feeling like you were feeling back when you were still in Sydney, and feeling stuck and unsure about how to sort of find that more fulfillment or to navigate those obstacles, what would you tell them?
So you asked for one, but I'm going to do two.
That's okay.
Sorry. One is a simple thing, which is just think about, like, what's the worst that could happen as well. So when I was looking to move to Israel, we didn't go. There was a lot of planning, as I said, ahead of time. But and while I told my wife's this, I blame this all on my wife. This is all my wife's idea. But when we got on the plane, I put a sort of sting to her. I said, this is a one-way ticket. Right? we are committing. This is not.
There's no going back.
There's not going back. Right. That said, we didn't go and sell the house straight away. We knew that, just be practical. But the one thing that I was thinking was, what is the worst that could happen out of this? And in that case, the worst that could happen is we get there, it falls flat, and we go back to what we had already, which wasn't terrible at all. Right? It wasn't terrible at all. We had our friends and we had our family. I had a career. I was, I knew what I was doing. I guess I would have had to go and get a job again, back in Australia.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, but it's not a terrible outcome. And so when I'm thinking about taking that leap, if you're thinking that being afraid to take that leap just because you're just afraid of what could happen. If you think that, what is the worst thing
What's the
that could happen,
worst?
and if that worst is not so bad, then what's really so
Yeah.
scary?
Yep.
So much to worry about.
That's good advice, Mark.
Yeah. And I said two. The other one is the other one is I would say plan but don't overplan.
Uh-huh.
We looked at places that we might want to live. I'd already started trying to build a bit of a professional network in Israel before moving, just to send out those feelers, understand who's who in the zoo.
Mm-hmm.
But it was not okay. Yeah, let's make sure I've got the job by this time, and we're going to be living in this particular house, and the kids are going to be at this school forever, and
Mm-hmm. Not
not
too detailed.
all those, not being too detailed on it. And in fact, when I think about it, okay, we stayed in this town. The housing situation worked out pretty good. The job ended up I ended up on a path that I never envisaged. I thought maybe I could start with a local insurer. In fact, I deliberately chose a local insurer because I wanted to work in Hebrew.
Mm.
Because
That was
I
part
thought
of the experience.
if I don't throw myself in, then I'll never really quite settle into the country.
Mm.
But that I ended up, going independent and doing a startup for a while. That was
Yeah.
never on the cards at all. My kids' schools, like, my youngest, who's graduating in a few months' time, she was the one kid who we didn't have to pull out of school and go to another one. So
Okay.
all those sorts of plans.
Yeah.
We had plans, but they weren't hard and set. So don't overplan. I
Yep.
would say.
Yep. Some great advice. So thinking about what's the worst that could happen, but also making sure you've got a plan, but not too detailed a plan, just enough of a plan to make sure you've got the right direction, but not overcomplicating the detail, because things never turn out exactly as we plan anyway. So
For sure not.
some great advice there, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And I think for a lot of people listening who are thinking about making a mid-career pivot, I think they'll probably be quite encouraged and somewhat reassured by your story, but also your practical advice that you've shared as well. So thank you so much for your time today, Mark.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.